All right. Hello, everybody. Here we go. I cannot promise or say anything about the length of this one because my neck is horrible at the moment. I don't know what I did. I fell asleep with a regular neck and woke up with a terrible one. So I'm not going to be remaining in a natural sitting position like this for very long. Oops, no, not Google Docs. What am I after? Google Earth. That's what we're looking for. Let's get ready for the lag as Google Earth freezes us up. Any bit? Oh no, it's actually being kind of functional this time. That won't last long, but for the time being at least. All right, wait for people to show up for a few minutes. I'll take a sip of water real quick and let me think about the order I want to go through things in. Okay, so while I wait for people to show up, I'll start off with some stuff here. And Epic Pen is cooperating this time. Hooray. All right, so Iraq, multiple things going on with Iraq. We have some field expansions down here in some of the larger, somewhat older fields that were never fully expanded, and some of those new fields that were discovered up here. Those are theoretically once again about to be brought online, but that was also the case last year, and they ended up getting delayed to the end of this year. So we'll see. In theory, this would be 200,000 plus barrels per day of additional total capacity brought to Iraq, and on top of their current maximum, which is about 5, so that would be a maximum capability of 5.2. And apparently, the uh, pipeline through Turkey from Kurdistan actually did restart, and that is a jump of about 200 or 300,000 barrels per day, which would put Iraq back up at about 4.6 at the moment. So we will have to wait and see how everything goes. Also, for those who missed it, I did a video in here. Where is it? It's the very latest one I did. Iraq is nearing a critical water reservoir issue point. Let's get a big exclamation mark there, as big as possible. Iraq has, as you know, you have the Euphrates and Tigris rivers that come down through Iraq, and both of those have a lot of damming going on up in Turkey that is withholding water from Iraq and Syria. And apart from that, the region is also has been in a drought ever since the 21st century started. So both factors combined, the river flow rate is exceedingly low. And to supplement the growing gap between Iraq's water demand and the declining supply from the rivers, Iraq has been utilizing its effectively at this point non-renewable water in different reservoirs along the dams, and they're now down to only 8% of that total remaining, down into single digits. So actually within the threshold of running out of viable gap filling water, which would immediately cause enormous problems. This is even closer than Tunisia came. If you remember, Tunisia also had an 8, but they had a 1 in front of the 8. 2 years ago, Tunisia got down to only 18% water availability remaining. Iraq is down to nothing in front of the 8, is down to only 8%. So this has the possibility to turn very bad very quickly within the next year or two, depending on how much, if any, rain Iraq and the region as a whole receives within that time frame. All right, let's see. one person, one person. Right. I'm a bit surprised this time. This is the usual time things I usually do this, but what is going on outside? Someone was hauling a really noisy trailer outside. Okay, so down here in Gaza, to the surprise of absolutely no one, the ceasefire failed. Uh, both Hamas and Israel are insisting that it didn't fail, that they are adhering to it. But in reality, Hamas is doing random stuff, and Israel is bombing Gaza. So the ceasefire is effectively non-existent. But for publicity's sake, even with bomb explosions and smoke rising from rubble in the background, effectively both sides are publicly insisting that it's perfectly fine and that it totally does exist, even though it doesn't. In the meantime, as mentioned before, apart from that ceasefire failing, even if it wasn't, the IDF has shifted a bunch of its bombing focus back up to Lebanon and has been bombing stuff all over Lebanon as of the last week or two. And even if they didn't do that, they are still taking actions against the Houthis in Yemen. So Netanyahu has plenty of avenues to keep the country is in danger, thus indefinitely expending the national defense emergency and thus indefinitely staying in power. And also, again, there is the upcoming renewal of the campaign against Iran. Supposedly, sometime at the start of October, it was sometime within the next 3 months. So before the end of this year, the leak back in summer was supposedly that it would restart sometime in early November. We'll obviously have to wait and see whether that ends up being true or not. If that was an actual leak, then for the sake of not giving validity to it, I would assume they would probably start it at not that particular time frame. But obviously, can't be sure about that. Again, have to wait and see. Over in the Americas, yeah, the Caribbean, where, as you guys know well enough by now, U.S. has been pouring in and stocking naval assets, air assets on Puerto Rico, and now stuff on the islands offshore, immediately offshore of Venezuela, with not covert because people see them, but covert as in nothing specific about them, what or who they were carrying has been publicly stated. Flights, C-17 flights going in and out of the islands offshore of Venezuela, and numerous F-35s and Reaper drones being stationed on Puerto Rico. So the buildup is ongoing for the inevitable swap over of rulership in Venezuela. However, something interesting happened recently. Hold on, should switch over to yellow. Yellow works better here. Something interesting happened recently, and that is let's make a huge question mark. Actually, oops, no, what am I doing? Huge question mark, and that is that Maduro offered basically a preemptive surrender. He contacted the U.S. administration again because he already offered to acquiesce to whatever other terms that the U.S. wanted without him leaving power. But now he offered a new proposal, straight up publicly offering to leave power because he doesn't want to die. He offered to leave power and all the other things he previously offered, and it was rejected again, as the U.S. government has said repeatedly, diplomacy is no longer an option. So he was rejected again, partly because part of his proposal involved him not actually immediately leaving power, but he agreed in the proposal, he agreed to leave power after another few years, after he was sure, in his view, the country was ready for him to leave power. So if he does another one of these and offers to just vacate, I don't know, go live on that resort island offshore of Cuba or something, if he offers to do that just immediately and hand over the government to the pro-US opposition, I don't know if that would be accepted or not. I mean, maybe, but I think the Pentagon would probably still want to just rid Venezuela of all of its military assets, however few they are, to begin with. But for this week, at least, buildup in the Caribbean has remained stalled for 1 week because there is a hurricane in the Southern Caribbean that is kind of just sitting there. It's just sitting in place, very gradually moving. So that has been posing a hazard and thus delaying any additional movement of more naval vessels or air flights in. So whenever things might have started, that has probably postponed those plans by a week or two. So we'll see when and if those actually come about. Get anybody else? No. Meanwhile, while we're at it, the U.S. government shutdown continues for day 23, about to 24. And down here, where I am in exile at my parents' house, my dad, upon whose income we primarily depend, is now going to not be paid anymore until it's over. So that's going to be awesome. Love when this happens. It's fabulous, obviously. Let's see what we got going over here. Ah, yes, we had more. This one's Ryazan. Is that Ryazan or the one above it is Ryazan? Darn, Tembo, if the one above it is Ryazan. Okay, so let me shift it. There we go. So Ryazan refinery was struck. The Astrakhan one was struck again. The Orenburg one was struck, and one other was struck. I can't remember which one or where. Uh, the remaining fuel depot on Crimea was struck again, and now it's down to like 5 storage tanks remaining. And also, Ukraine has started striking Russia's power distribution infrastructure, primarily in the immediate vicinity, several distribution substations around here, but also over here in the Urals area, they've hit one of the primary national, like high voltage interconnector lines that allows one region to lend power to the other when there's an issue. So that is down and out of commission. And also, oops, no, that's not Mordovia. This is Mordovia. Also in Bryansk, Mordovia, Tatarstan, Bashkiri, I believe, and also in the Orenburg region, a number of military factories were also struck this time, including artillery shell manufacturer, remote detonation systems manufacturer for the explosives that Russia uses on its FPV drones, or the remote controlled suicide drones. And what other one was it? It was in Bryansk. It's the one in Bryansk. Rocket propellant. That's not the only rocket propellant manufacturer in Russia. There are 3 more still functional elsewhere, I believe, but one in Bryansk was struck, and there was another type of strike against something else. I forgot what it was, but so that's the general onslaught of things that happened there. And as aging of civilization continues, retirement ages continue being dragged up. So France had one of the lowest, was still at 62 for a while, and just a few years ago they kicked it to 64, and that caused huge riots across France. But this was one of the few times where the French government actually did not back down in the face of the riots because financially they kind of can't. They're in a no remaining options position, as many other governments are. Deutschland is the most recent member to jump in with this. Their retirement age was already in the late 60s, like most others are. But now they've put forward a proposition to kick it up over 70, put a little upward arrow there, with some suggestions saying to bump it up as high as 73. I doubt something that high that soon would get passed. They'll probably settle on only doing up to 70 for when people can start receiving pension payments. Back in the US, it was also raised just kind of secretly, sort of. It was at, it was, I believe it was 66, and it got secretly raised to 67 when no one was really looking. Congress passed that back in November of last year when everyone was distracted by the election. That was kind of the perfect time to pass something like this, obviously, when no one's going to be looking at it. And it was either 66 up to 67, or it might have already been 67 and it got raised up to 68. I'm not sure. So, but it was raised by 1 year, sort of covertly when no one was paying attention, because obviously any government that's thinking about the process would want to try their best to avoid riots. But I guess France probably just couldn't find a big enough distraction. And also, the French are kind of obsessed with their low retirement age. Uh, Germany, Deutschland, I really don't know why they would do something this stupid and like kind of publicly talk about it like this. It would have been better to again do like the 1 year at a time every 5 years or so and try to do it as covertly as possible. But no, they just sort of publicly, openly talked about just jumping it from like 68 up to 73. That's not really going to go over all that well. And obviously, over in Russia, for double obvious reasons, the demographic burden and all the money that is being drain funneled down into their little failed fiasco here. They also have raised their retirement age recently. I think it was last year they did it, or it might have been the year before, but they raised theirs as well. I believe it was from 65 up to 66. And China has also been raising theirs. They began a multi-year process a few years back, and they were actually still down, I believe, at like only 60, and they're up to 62. So everybody is doing such. The ones who are in a like severe position where they need to do it is South Korea in particular. But I think their retirement is still at like 67, and Japan's is still at like 66. So they're gonna they have to kick that payment age up quite a bit soon. All right. Let me think if there was anything else that I'm missing. Did we get anything else? Uh, OPEC actually, OPEC actually signaled a few days ago that they're considering at least halting the production increase, if not reversing it, because they did want to regain market share, but the price actually has kind of gone a bit lower than they would have wanted it to. They expected it, they were willing for it to go from the 80s back down to 70 or even the upper 60s, but going down into the 50s seems to have been like too much for them. They didn't actually want it to go that far. So they signaled recently that they're considering at least a halt, but might even consider having some members dial back a little bit. But that will remain to be seen for next month. But they also they also needed to provide a bit of extra buying space for India, since India actually finally agreed to stop purchasing oil from Russia. They weren't purchasing like all of their imports from Russia, but they were purchasing like between 1 and 2 million barrels a day. And the amount OPEC has added back up to this point roughly equals out to that. So that provides a gap filler and thus would lean more towards OPEC not dialing back down just yet, but probably just stopping. So we'll see when that comes about. Supposedly, some people were talking about China agreeing to stop buying oil from Russia, but even if they say that at face value, that's almost certainly not going to happen because China just needs so much. And also, as I've spoken of before, they are importing as much as they can, as quickly as they can, to try to build up stockpiles for when they launch their Taiwan invasion, because they know even by danger to the shipping routes alone, they will get cut off from a lot of imports because shipping industries will just refuse to have their vessels sail anywhere near this while everything is going on. So they would only be getting stuff through their northernmost ports, which would bottleneck everything, oil supply included. So China would not really likely be willing to actually agree to that because they're over importing right now and desperately trying to stockpile as much as possible as quickly as possible. No, let me drink some water and probably going to end soon because of how terrible of a situation my neck is in. Oh, this is painful. Whales. Whales randomly came up in the hashtag feed. Mechanical plants, oil and gas processing units, German retirement age, electricity infrastructure. Was this? Oh, yeah. Random news bit. Uh, as quoted on Twitter by everybody, Rocket Man is at it again. He launched another random ballistic missile for funsies to try to remind the world that he exists because he hasn't been getting enough attention recently. So, randomly launched a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan just to remind us all that he's there. So, don't forget Kim Jong Un, everybody. He doesn't like to get excluded from the party. That I spoke on that briefly earlier in the stream. Roll back the uh you'll have to roll back the thing to the beginning or somewhere around the beginning. All right. I think that's probably gonna be it then. I can't really think of anything else, and I want to lay back down eventually because of neck pain stuff. Ugh. Which is not being helped by the uh, stress of the fact that my dad's not going to be getting paid unless the government reopens. So I will see you guys around next time, unless any like major questions or anything come up that weren't simply answered earlier in the streams. I'll give it like the 30 seconds for the usual stream lag delay. While I also try to think if I'm forgetting anything. I don't think so. There's nothing really specific going on. Uh, wait. Somebody, a few people. I'll cover those in the oil demand update video anyway. So a few people did break their oil demand records, I think. Turkey is getting close to hitting 1.4 million barrels per day for the first time. They got up to 1.37. Vietnam got closer to 800,000 for the first time. I think that got up close to like 770. And anybody else have a record breaker? I don't think so. Although Colombia has been continuing to climb, and in overall average, instead of around 500, is now starting to stay above 500, between 500 and 550,000 barrels per day for domestic consumption, while their own production continues its terminal decline and is down to about 740. So their export margin is quickly slipping away, just like Ecuador's is. Had delays getting data from the usual suspects like Morocco, no data for quite a while. The Philippines, after giving us that one update recently with several backlog months, they've now stopped, so nothing out of them. So everyone's just on their usual behavior. India is now heading back upwards as closer to New Year's or the early part of the year, I guess. In each year seems to be their point of higher demand. So they've begun climbing back upwards from their lower point of the year, and they're now back up over 5.9. So might be going for it. In the first couple months of the upcoming year, 2026, might see them go up over 6 million barrels per day for the first time. And I think that's, yeah, that's probably it then, unless anything else popped up. No, and no. All right. Thank you, everybody who showed up. I'm going to have to drop off now, and I will see you guys around next time.